My name is Sofia Ehrich, and I am an art historian, researcher, and consultant for multisensory experiences. My company, the Olfactory Contractor, coaches and consults museum practitioners and others on the educational impact smell can have on the public. It is my pleasure to welcome you as the host of the Internet of Senses podcast for the Sense of Smell. And I have Nils Lommerin with me today. As the co-founder and CEO of Olfactive Biosolutions, Nils leads the development of innovative solutions that utilize a combination of biology and artificial intelligence to analyze taste and smell receptors. Prior to founding Olfactive Biosolutions, he served as president and CEO of Monte Foods and has also held significant roles at Texas Pacific Group, Oxford Health Plans, PepsiCo, and Post Cereals. He holds a Master of Science degree from Carnegie Mellon University and a Bachelor of Arts degree from East Stroudsburg University. So welcome, Nils. Thanks for coming on the podcast.
Oh, thank you for the opportunity. Looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, me too. So I have the very formal bio that I just read, but can you start by introducing yourself and explaining your background, perhaps how you ended up in sensory businesses?
Sure, absolutely, would love to. So I've spent over 30 years in the food business. I worked for PepsiCo, for the Post Cereal Company, Monte. Ultimately was the president and CEO of Monte, which is at the time a $4 billion publicly traded company. And so I've always been, just very attracted and very fascinated by food and, trying to, deliver to consumers the best possible products. And that was one of the things that really attracted me to Del Monte, was just the nutritious nature of, fruits and vegetables compared to the, significant number of products in the market today that are so ultra processed and create health challenges for the country as a whole. And that's what really led me into olfactive biosolutions, was to really understand how the olfactory and taste receptors that you have in your nose and tongue, we all have receptors throughout our entire body, referred to as ectopic receptors, but essentially they're olfactory receptors that are outside of the nose and tongue. And the physiological effect and impact that they can have on the human body. So the idea of olfactive biosolutions is to leverage our knowledge of these receptors throughout the body, the physiological effect that they have on the body, and find ways to help them to function more efficiently and trigger better health outcomes for people. So we have numerous number of food formulations that deliver better health outcomes for people. So it's a very exciting field, and one, frankly, where I think we've just scratched the surface in terms of the potential of leveraging the olfactory and taste receptors that are, throughout the body to deliver better health outcomes for people.
And what's your personal excitement for the sense of smell and maybe also the sense of taste, because you've worked so much in food industry?
The power of it. I don't think people really understand how important the sense of taste and smell and food is to overall health and the both physiological and mental benefits of ensuring that people have a really healthy diet and, leveraging those the receptors in taste and smell. So it's a very powerful medicine for people. And if done right, it's very helpful. And if done wrong, as I mentioned, in the large number of ultra-processed foods on the market today, it leads to some pretty significant chronic diseases in ultra-processed foods, which lead to obesity, which lead to majority of chronic diseases in the country. So, my excitement and passion is about how to help America to be healthier by leveraging the receptors of taste and smell.
And have you always worked in food-centric companies, or did you find yourself here at some point?
Actually, my first job out of business school was with the Post cereal company. So I've always been in food related businesses in one form
Okay.
or other. So the core of all my experiences and starts with food, even though, you know, it might not necessarily be food development, but, food marketing, food sales, food packaging, branding, but all the core of it was 30 plus years in food centric businesses.
Was that a choice, or was it something that you just found yourself in one day? Like, did you say, "Okay, I wanna work for Post Cereal," and then continue on this food journey, or was it something that was, like, an opportunity that you found?
No, I think at the time it was the best job offer I had out of business school.
Okay.
It just so
Yeah,
happened to be in the food business, and I really enjoyed it and never left. So,
that's great. That's
so
fantastic.
it was organic, I guess, in terms of
Yeah,
evolution into the food business, and it's
it
evolved.
sounds fun. It sounds like a fun place to be, so
Absolutely, and everybody needs to eat, right?
yeah, exactly. So you've talked a little bit about this already, but what is olfactive biosolutions and what are the main goals? Because I know it's called olfactive biosolutions, but it seems like it also has a lot to do with consuming as well. Like, so where's that balance between, you're calling something olfactive, but it leads to other senses as well?
The way I would describe our company is as a all natural food and molecule based drug discovery company. So right now you have large pharmaceutical companies that work in labs. They develop synthetic molecules that the body's never been exposed to, and they affect receptors in the body. And those receptors then create physiological changes to address some sort of disease or medical condition. What we're doing at Olfactive Biosolutions is, we understand the same receptors that the synthetic molecules are working against and have identified very specific food molecules that can trigger similar physiological changes. So those olfactory and ectopic receptors that are both in the nose and tongue, but throughout the body, all of them have a job and they do something. And what we're doing is we're developing, identifying, and patenting unique formulations of food molecules. And these food molecules then target the same receptors that the synthetic molecules do from the pharma industry and trigger similar physiological results. The difference with our products is we're doing it with food. So you don't have side effects because the body's been consuming these foods for millennia. And it's your natural, not synthetic, creation of these physiological results that go through the natural pathways as opposed to the pathways of the synthetic drugs. So, we can create the same positive benefits through combinations of food molecules to replace synthetic pharma products, which come with a lot of high cost, hassle in terms of getting prescriptions, and very minimal, if any, side effect profile versus the pharma products. So we have 5 patents granted and 9 pending to address multiple chronic conditions. And I think one of the keys to our success is our science team was able to identify, people will say, for example, that clove provides a feeling of fullness. And it turns out that it's actually not the clove itself, but it's actually a particular molecule in clove, an active ingredient, so to speak, in clove or in cinnamon or in coconut. So we just extract that active ingredient, and therefore we can pack a tremendous amount of that molecule, that active ingredient molecule, into a gel cap or into a powder to be added to a food product. And then when it's consumed, it triggers that physiological response that's similar to a synthetic pharma product.
And so what's the research process to that? So you have a team of scientists that are looking into these kinds of physiological possibilities of certain molecules, and then you look into how to encapsulate that?
Yeah, it's a combination of understanding the receptors that you have throughout your body, including those in the nose and tongue, and what those receptors do. And then we test food molecules. We've tested over 50,000 different food molecules to understand what food molecules affect particular receptors. So there are certain receptors that release a hormone like GLP-1, which would be like a Ozempic, which is an injection of GLP-1, synthetic GLP-1. But, all of our bodies release the GLP-1 hormone naturally. So we've identified the receptors that release the GLP-1 hormone, and we've identified through leveraging AI which of those 50,000 food molecules we've tested trigger the release of your natural GLP. So then we can take those food molecules and put it into a patented formulation, whether it's a gel cap you might take or as a powder that would be a food ingredient. And then when you consume that, it will trigger the natural release of GLP-1, and you'll see the similar physiological benefits to an Ozempic or a Mounjaro or one of the other pharma products. And we have a patent on blood pressure, blood sugar regulation. We have patents pending on things from muscle regeneration to serotonin and dopamine release, which would be a replacement for anxiety medications. But the whole idea is, instead of using synthetic molecules to trigger receptors to react, let's figure out what unique food molecules will trigger those same receptors to react. And therefore, our solution will get the same results, but far safer, because what we're using is food molecules that the body consumes every day and triggers the natural release of these hormones, as opposed to a synthetic molecule, which the body's not exposed to, therefore typically brings side effects and doesn't necessarily go through the natural pathways to do the job.
Yeah, and it might be better opportunity to train your body to naturally produce or do these processes rather than doing this through an injection of synthetic materials. Your body is more used to natural things, so then it might naturally start generating this on its own, I guess. Could be an outcome.
Yeah. Well, one of the problems with the synthetic injections, when you talk about the weight loss products that are so popular in the US, I mean, 15 million adult Americans are taking one of the semaglutide medications, whether it's tirzepatide or Mounjaro or Ozempic, all through injection, only available through injection. And the challenge is, it's a synthetic molecule, it's injected, and only a small portion of that makes it to the brain to release those hormones. And because it's not going through natural pathways, you need to inject yourself with far more than is required to get the job done, so to speak. And so the rest of that synthetic GLP-1 ends up in places it shouldn't be, like the liver and the kidneys. And I'm sure everyone's heard stories about how people suffered from liver failure or kidney issues, etc., because these synthetic hormones are coming into your body in massive quantities, not going through natural pathways, and only a small amount ends up, where it should be in triggering that response. Whereas if you're using natural food molecules, all you're doing is triggering the body to do more of what it already does. And so therefore it doesn't overproduce the hormone, and the hormone goes through natural pathways and doesn't end up in all kinds of other organs in the body.
I know that some of these injectable synthetic molecule like Ozempic also stops things like alcoholism, or like there's some effects to this as well. Do you think that do the food molecules have these same effects or not?
The product that we have, the patents that we have, the formulation of food molecules triggers the natural release of hormones, GLP-1 and GIP as an example. The synthetic product is just a mimic version of GLP-1. So the physiological results are going to be identical. So it's a gut-brain connection, and what happens is a message is sent to your brain when those hormones are released that, frankly, changes the way you view food. You think about food less, certain types of food become less attractive, you feel satiated more quickly, you lose interest in alcohol, typically you lose interest in snacking and sweets. So all of the physiological results you get from the synthetic, you'll get from our formulation because it's the same but different. It's the GLP-1 hormone signaling to the brain. The difference is we're triggering your body to release its natural GLP-1 and send that signal to the brain, as opposed to injecting that synthetic molecule into your body. But the end result is the same.
The same. Okay. And other than acquiring patents, are there any other challenges that you're facing with this process?
Anytime you start a business, particularly a cutting edge business, there's significant challenges in terms of building a team, making sure that people are focused on the right things. You're developing the science, you're turning the science into a commercial product, and you're marketing that commercial product in a space with a significant amount of competition, both from pharma products, but also from non-pharma products that claim they can accomplish certain results, but frankly can't. So the messaging of the product and helping people understand the science behind it is extremely important as well. So
Okay. You mentioned AI before. How do you use AI it sounded like it was part of the research process, correct?
it is, yeah, because if you think about it, if you have, I'll just use round numbers, but if you have 1,000 different olfactory ectopic receptors throughout your body, and each one does a different thing, and you've got data on 50,000 food molecules, and you want to find out, okay, which of those 50,000 food molecules affect any one of those 1,000 olfactory or atopic receptors, it's combinational and it's in the trillions, right? You've got 50,000 up against 1,000, and it's any combination. So humans are not capable of calculating those trillions of different combinations. So we have proprietary algorithms that will look at the data on those 50,000 food molecules, the physiological response from you get from any one of those 1,000 atopic or olfactory receptors, and it will run all of those different combinations and say, okay, if you're looking for a product that's going to affect this ectopic receptor, which regulates blood pressure, then here are the 20 or 30 different food molecules you should look at. And then the science team can focus on those 20 or 30 different food molecules as opposed to trying to manage and look at each one of those 50,000 food molecules individually. So it takes, frankly, an impossible task and makes it manageable.
And so did you feed the AI a specific data set of research to understand food molecules? Or does it I'm still wrapping my head around AI in general, but I know that typically AI doesn't have such a sensory rich knowledge set or data set. So I was just curious if you fed the AI research data on food molecules or if it's something that it had already.
No, it doesn't exist anywhere outside of olfactive biosolutions. So over a period of 8 years, those 50,000 different food molecules were analyzed and tested against the different receptors that you have throughout your body. So all of that proprietary data was then put into a proprietary AI algorithm, which then goes ahead and do the work to determine what are the most likely food molecules to trigger the physiological result that you're looking for.
Okay, so there was sort of data set, but that was built over time.
The scientists spent 8 years in the lab studying, like I said, 50,000 different food molecules to understand what receptors in the nose, tongue, and throughout the body, what receptors they triggered, and then understanding, okay, what does that particular receptor do from a physiological
Mm.
standpoint? All those receptors are in your body for a reason, whether it's to release a hormone or to regulate, as I mentioned, blood pressure or muscle regeneration or release serotonin or dopamine, etc. So all of that data, which is proprietary data that we have, was then put into our AI system, and it allows the AI system to be able to do that combinational work to be able to narrow down the number of food molecules we should look at when we're developing new formulations to address new chronic diseases.
And then the scientists, do they do trials
Yeah.
to
Mhm. Yes.
using that information?
Once a formulation is created, there's a series of trials that we go through, ultimately leading to clinical trials comparable to what a pharma company would put their products through. But there's, a series of trials that we go through to get to that point, starting with very small consumer trials and then expanding that based on the success of the prior trial results.
And so you mentioned the 8 years. Was that prior to the start of Olfactive Biosolutions that this research was being done and then it turned into the company?
Yeah, so there was a company, Romix, and they spent about 8 years developing and studying and collecting this data.
Mhm.
And Olfactive Biosolutions acquired many of the assets from Aromix, and that became the base for Olfactive Biosolution, which was founded about a year and a half ago.
Okay. So you're still starting out.
Yeah, so Olfactive Biosolutions has been around for a year and a half, but we're building on 8 years of prior scientific research.
Okay.
So we're substantially more mature than a typical 18-month-old company would be.
Yeah. But you were able to start from something
They had a head start.
before.
Exactly.
Yeah. You mentioned the clove. You had the clove example for fullness. Do you have
Mm.
other examples like that that you have found that serve certain physiological effects in the body?
Yeah, so in, our weight loss, blood sugar regulation formulation, which we're going to will be in market in September. It has molecules from 6 different fruits and vegetables. Clove is one of them, cinnamon is another, coconut is another. So we've extracted molecules from 6 different fruits and vegetables, and all of those act on certain receptors that release several hormones focused on weight loss and blood sugar regulation.
It's really interesting. Do you know what the molecule is called?
Yeah, so in clove, it's eugenol.
It's eugenol. Okay. I know it has antibacterial properties, but I didn't know it
Yeah,
also causes fullness. Or the feeling of being full, you said, right?
correct. Acetaldehyde is in cinnamon. So each of those molecules are, like I said, we've extracted a single molecule from 6 different fruits and vegetables.
And what kind of process do you go for sourcing these materials? Is that challenging, or is it all over the world that you source your materials? I'm assuming. I was just curious.
Yeah, so these food molecules are in many cases pretty common food ingredients in other products. So we can acquire the food molecules and they're readily available. The key is not the availability of the food molecule, but the patented formulation and how it's ingested and absorbed by the body and how it targets the mechanism of action of how it targets particular ectopic or olfactive receptors.
Yeah. What are the different types of expertise that you need to have on your team? And perhaps this was different when the company was Aromics. I think you said it was called Aromics. Perhaps it's changed a bit. What does the team look like?
I would say, I think it starts with the science and the scientific development, and then we then obviously need a logistics and supply chain and manufacturing organization to develop the product based on the science. And then we have a marketing and sales organization that then goes and sells the product either to large consumer companies as an ingredient to an existing brand or in a supplement format, which would be sold direct to consumers. So, it's pretty standard to any company. You need sales and marketing. You need someone to sell the product. You need someone to make the product, and you need someone to develop the product.
But the development involves a lot of research, I would
Right.
think. So you probably have different types of researchers on the job. But was that only in the first 8 years, or I'm sure you're continuously
No,
evolving?
yeah, we have a lab. We have a lab today in San Carlos, outside of San Francisco, and we have people in the lab every day working on developing new formulations of food molecules to address different chronic diseases and or health conditions. So as I said, we have five granted patents, nine pending, and we're continuing to work to develop new products. And as the science team develops and patents those products, we then make the products and then we sell the products.
Yeah, because I know that you have a lot of competition, I guess, from not necessarily from biosolutions, but from the pharmaceutical companies. So how do you approach that challenge?
The trick is in communication. It's really not that challenging, frankly, to compete with the pharma companies because when you look at what we have in our branded supplement product Pivot, you can achieve the same physiological benefits of an Ozempic, but you don't have to go to the doctor and get a prescription. It's about 1/10 the cost. You don't have to worry about the side effects, which can be fairly significant and in some cases life-threatening. So it's an all-natural solution as opposed to a synthetic solution at a much lower cost, and you get the same benefits, and it's a heck of a lot more convenient when you can go online and order Pivot as opposed to having to go to the doctor, get a prescription. And by the way, you don't have to stick a needle in your gut.
That's definitely a plus.
So yeah, so I don't think the competition is in the product. The competition is always going to be in the message and the marketing and acquiring the consumers.
Yeah. So I know you went to business school, so they probably didn't teach you about how to be with companies that are more sensory, I would assume. Have you learned anything from your own experience about working in like food companies, or now you're in olfactive biosolutions? Have you learned anything different that maybe you couldn't have learned from your business school background?
Yeah, I mean, I've learned an awful lot about the science of food, which isn't certainly isn't taught in business school. In business school, the structure's about existing products and building them and marketing them and getting them to the consumer. Throughout my career, I've learned a lot more about the science of food, and certainly that learning curve has accelerated since I've been with olfactive biosolution and really understanding how food affects the human body,
And
both ways and bad ways.
does this affect how you work with your team, or how you further your knowledge about the company? Do you have any like exercises that you do with the team that are maybe different than if you were just in a company that wasn't about food or wasn't about olfactive biosolutions?
Uh, but we spend a lot of time talking about the science, and we talk a lot about what are the needs of the consumer,
Mm.
and you know what is it that how we prioritize our product development to address what are the greatest needs And that's the reason we've initially focused on weight loss and obesity, because weight loss and obesity, driven by the high amounts of ultra processed foods we consume in America, is really the core to a vast majority of chronic diseases. And if you can cure obesity, you can resolve the development of multiple chronic diseases, from heart disease to high blood pressure to blood sugar issues, diabetes, etc. So we've really focused on the core of what causes significant amount of chronic diseases. So the benefits are really amplified throughout society. And given we're working with food molecules, which are much less expensive than the synthetic versions, we can go and offer them globally to countries that wouldn't normally have access to pharmaceutical products, but still struggle with diabetes and other diseases. So the potential for us is enormous.
Yeah. I'm really excited to see how it kicks off or how it continues to develop, because it seems you're just starting out and it's very promising and sounds like really amazing. So I'm excited. Do you have any advice for people like you who are going into a more sensory business, or who are can also just be starting out or working on a startup?
Don't underestimate the amount of work involved. And it's probably the first thing I would say. Building a company, particularly a science-based company, is very challenging. You've got to get the right people, and you've got to build the right team, and you've got to be able to package that and communicate that to the consumer. So it's a pretty large undertaking, but at the same time, extremely rewarding.
Yeah. Okay, so to wrap up with the last question, what's next for you, but also for Olfactive Biosolutions? What's coming up?
Well, the most exciting thing of all is we're going to launch our first product. We've had probably 100 consumers trial the product, but in September, we're going to be marketing commercially direct to consumers. So we'll launch and begin generating revenue with our pivot brand, and which is focused on weight loss and blood sugar regulation. So I don't think you can get much bigger than that first launch, which will be followed very quickly by other patented formulations that address other chronic diseases.
So after a year and a half, you'll finally release your first product.
Correct. Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then how many more do you plan to release after that? Do you have a plan?
I would say, I mean, I don't know how long, I don't have a specific timeline, but I could foresee a dozen different pharmaceutical replacement products based on all natural food molecules at some point.
Very cool. Well, is there anything that you'd like to add before we wrap up? I really enjoyed learning about this. I didn't know anything about this before we had this interview, so it was very enjoyable to hear your perspective.
No, just appreciate the time and love talking about our company and what impact we're going to have on the world. So it's an exciting time for us, and I appreciate your time today.
Yeah, you too. Thank you.